Okay, we are recording, and thank you so much for reminding me. The reason we're doing this call is to prepare conversation coordinators in Canada and in America for the last 4 or 5 sessions of the course, because it really is the meat of the course is right here. Everything's been leading up to helping our people become resilient and be able to get up after a fall and continue. And the first thing we're saying right now is to thank so much our conversation coordinators. You have made this possible. It never would have happened without you. You're helping to change and keep our culture by cross-pollinating your gifts and talents to team members that are not on your team. Your pods are completely on different teams, and all of you have been doing such an amazing job. We never would have done this without you. It's all I can say. To be the first ones to go through this was probably somewhere between an honor and a torture. And so I just really appreciate you all so much. We want to just remind everybody about the confidentiality. Sometimes people have accidentally breached confidentiality. We're going to learn to be better at this, but the idea is between the intellectual property laws and our relationship with Brene, we really want to keep it nice and tight. And it keeps it in kind of a position where other people will say, oh, I want to be in it next year. And that's what we're really hoping. So tonight's about psychological insights and strategies for you conversation coordinators as you head into this whole idea of teaching people a formula for resiliency. I have never seen anything in psychology in all my years of schooling that had an actual formula for resiliency. We know that formula from Brene. We can teach it to our people, and they can utilize it every time they have an issue, every time they get disappointed. The whole point here is for all of you to hold the vision and trust the process. And I know that the first round of this course, it can get your trust can get shaky. You wonder, am I doing the things right? What's going on with my pod? No one's talking. And so there's all kinds of questioning that goes on. But all the ups and downs that we've talked about in our chats and everywhere else have been part of a process. And it's trusting that vision and that process, just like you do the business plan. You know that people are going to get scared and they're going to quit and they're going to do all kinds of things, but you hold the vision and you hold the trust in the process because you're experienced with that. Now that you're experienced with what we're doing here, it's easier for you to hold the trust and keep that vision going in the process. The speed of trust is a predictor of success. And so you may have a pod in which trust has been a real issue. When people don't share in Voxer, it's a trust issue. When people will not do 3-way calls, it's a trust issue. And trust comes after the segment on vulnerability. There's a reason for this. There's a rationale behind the way Brene constructed things and the way I put our stuff together. It's all based in psychological theory and research. So if your pod is struggling, you have to sometimes go back to vulnerability. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because high achievers are the worst ones at being vulnerable. And isn't that interesting? Right now, in America, we're at about the halfway point. And in the halfway point, most pods are starting to get it. They're starting to trust more. I'm hearing things from you conversation coordinators about how they're speaking up and they're crying and different things are happening. It's about the halfway point of the course. And that's when it starts to get a little more solid, that they will trust more. They will take more risks. They'll let themselves be more vulnerable. But the 2 weeks we spent on vulnerability is not sometimes enough for some people to break through their issues about vulnerability. And so sometimes we have to go back. A lot of times when there's a problem in a pod, a conversation coordinator will contact me on Voxer and we'll discuss what's going on. And many times we have the person go back to vulnerability and redo that segment because that's holding them back. They still have issues with feeling okay or feeling like vulnerability is a strength and not some kind of a deficit. One of the biggest challenges for conversation coordinators is really knowing what's the difference with each podster or even the pod itself about resistance versus legitimate complaints or issues. And one of the things that I say about this is we want to consider the possibility of resistance in everything that someone complains about, because we don't want to rip them off of the experience of going deeper than their superficial complaint. That's not to say that there isn't something legitimate going on. Sometimes, for example, when we talk about three-way calls, there may be a situation between a podster and their success partner in which there has been some tremendous damage in the past. And the podster is just pretty much unwilling to work with that person, which is kind of weird, because why did you select them as a success partner? But we'll work it, be that as it may. There may be some legitimate things that happen, or someone misses a call because some emergency happened. I heard a story about a woman in a pod who was driving home to try to get to her pod call, one of the podsters. Her car breaks down, so she goes into a restaurant, finds a quiet booth, and gets on her phone. I mean, to me, that's dedication. So how do we know if someone's being resistant? Typically, if someone isn't acting the same way they were when they got into the course. Do you remember the beginning when everybody was high and everybody was flipping out about, I can't wait to do this, and oh my gosh, Brene Brown, and I'm so excited? Why would that change? Well, it's because we're asking people to do things that are hard, to step out of their comfort zone. So if they're not as excited as they were in the very beginning, there's some resistance at play. So we always want to be aware of that. That is why we have, and I can't believe how many people have complained to me about this, oh, there's so many rules, quote unquote, rules in this program. Well, the rules, quote unquote, are to keep a safe container and to keep people slightly uncomfortable. By definition, if you're not in your comfort zone, you are uncomfortable. So we have these rules about not missing, not being on a cell phone, not having all these distractions. Why? Because if people have to sit and focus, they have to deal with their feelings. And we're doing them a favor by creating this container. And they may say, oh, rules, 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 because you know our people are entrepreneurs. All of you are entrepreneurs. Nobody wants to be told what to do. I had to change the word homework because that sounded too, I don't know what. We changed it to prep work. I mean, I don't even care. We'll use different language and get people not to be resistant. But the idea is that we do this for a reason. That's why you can't smoke or eat or, you know, have distractions when you're in a therapy session, because there can't be anything that distracts you from doing this emotional work. People will resist change. Even though they paid for the course, they want to change, people will resist it. And I don't need to tell you that, because you've been all doing Juice Plus for a million years, and you know that when you bring up Juice Plus, you get the kind of like this from people who don't want to change, or they'll tell you it's too expensive, which totally translates into, I don't want to change. Anxiety and fear are the number 1 and 2, if they're not the same thing, feelings that come up for people, but it's almost always disguised as anger or disgruntledness or external blaming. Anxiety and fear are often hidden under these kinds of things. And so you might be criticized, the program might be criticized. Brene Brown will never be criticized, I know. But the bottom line is, this is what people are really dealing with. And nobody likes to feel that. The hardest thing in the world is to sit in discomfort. And yet that's what we're trying to get people to do, to sit long enough in their discomfort so that they can change, but they can realize what it is so they can then change their behavior and fix it. The most contagious emotion is anxiety. So you will see things happen in your pods where one person is disgruntled and then everybody else starts getting disgruntled. And then you're like, oh my God, I lost my whole pod. But it's because that negative emotion, which is really anxiety, is the most contagious. And so one person can be like wildfire. You've seen this on Facebook. One person can be like wildfire, and that's why we have to help people to dig deeper and to get to the fact that I'm afraid or I feel anxious. I don't like feeling my feelings. This is the function of a team or a group. This will happen in a group at work, at a job, at an organization, at home office, whatever. It's a function of a team and a group that somebody will catch someone else's anxiety. And typically, if someone is really struggling with tremendous fear, it's because there's been something in their family of origin. And they're trying to protect themselves. They don't want to feel what's coming up for them. And that's why some coordinators have contacted me about people who we had to give a therapy referral to. Because it was coming up, they were brave enough to want to deal with it, but it had to be dealt with professionally. Most of our people are going to be able to deal with this and move through it. But in the case that they can't, and it's too deep, or it has a trauma aspect to it, then we refer somebody to therapy so that they get that kind of support, or to their pastor, something like that. There are two strategies that podsters will use, and of course all of us will use, in anxious situations. When we feel anxious or fearful or whatever, we're either going to overfunction or we're going to underfunction. And you'll see this in your podsters. Overfunctioning, not that I know anything about that, is all about being in control, being a control freak. So if we're anxious or whatever, we're going to control the you-know-what out of a situation because we don't like to feel anxious. And this, believe it or not, one of my first research projects was on variables of childbirth and how it translates later into functioning and also health, diseases and things like that. And it was all about your position in the birth order, how many siblings, the spacing between siblings, the genders of the siblings, all of that influences it. Typically, firstborns are overfunctioners. They tend to just take control because they're the firstborn and they have to control everything. Underfunctioning is where you either get like the deer in the headlights reaction, where people feel a sense of, I'm paralyzed right now because of this material that's coming up for me with Brene and the course, where they will avoid or they will not show up. That's underfunctioning. And either one of these two things, like you might see someone who was really kind of chipper and fun on the first few calls or whatever, and they actually contribute to the Voxer chats, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden they start underfunctioning. That's a sign that something's coming up for them. So that's, some things to look at with your pods. High performers typically will not sacrifice functioning for the sake of insight and growth. And this is really important because we have people that want to move like super fast through the marketing plan. And that's a good thing. I mean, we want that. We want them to make money. We want them to move fast. We want them to have a great story about, you only have one story. Someone needs to mute up because I'm hearing an echo, and that means you're on a cell phone. So if you would just mute out. Thank
Karen,
you.
will you repeat that statement again? High performers will not sacrifice
Functioning for insight and growth. Typically. I mean, there's some high performers that are very happy to look at, their personal growth, but in most cases, high performers value functioning, and they were raised in families where their behaviors were rewarded instead of who they are as people. So they try to burn this marketing plan. Now, again, it's not always a bad thing, but what happens to people that won't sacrifice functioning for insight and growth is at some point they hit a wall. It could be at Q. It could be, they're at Q for 5 years or something. Whatever the situation is, they actually hit a wall because they haven't done the insight and growth that will support them in stretching beyond their own performance level. So when you have some high performers, they can get very critical of personal development programs. And we had some of those in the surveys, and it was very revealing about some high performers who just were like wondering why people would slow down and look at these things, and it interferes with their functioning. We teach people, I mean, we can say that to people. I had a call with one of the podsters, and I said to her, you're a high functioner, and you value functioning so highly that it's hard for you to slow down so that you can speed up later. And I think, I don't know if it was Cheryl Cortese or somebody was saying that thing about sometimes, I know Rosie Klein says it, you have to slow down in order to speed up. Very hard for high performers because their performance will mask their feelings. And they don't want to feel those feelings. They don't want to feel a sense of doubt or anything like that. But everybody hits a wall at some point, almost everybody, where they have to look at how they're functioning and how they can improve on that. And so if you have high performers that are getting critical, you can say to yourself, I'm wondering if, this is a legitimate criticism where we can improve things, or if this is a situation where they can't stand feelings slowing down because then they have to feel their feelings. Some people are so afraid to feel their feelings because they think they'll never get back out of it. Like somehow their feelings are going to overwhelm them. And we're going to talk about the word overwhelm in a minute. So this is the first time I've ever heard of a formula to help people actually have something they can do every time they're disappointed or their feelings are hurt, or they didn't meet this goal that they wanted to set, or somehow they think they're going to make NMD in this month, and then we see that the numbers aren't there and the strength isn't there, so we ask them to wait and they feel this deflation. There's a formula now that all of us can use, and I'm so excited about it because I've started to actually really use this consciously every time I feel a sense of disappointment or my little feelers got hurt. And you know what it is because you've done this part of the course already. It's reckoning, rumbling, and revolution. Now, reckoning is the hardest part of this, believe it or not, because it's very hard to realize what we're really feeling. And reckoning really, I think the word she really is looking for is recognizing. Because emotions are called feelings because you feel them in your body. We are feeling beings that sometimes think, not thinking beings that sometimes feel. Emotion rules us completely as human beings. It's a whole biological gig. So the idea is we have to really work in these next units that we're doing, these next Zoom calls, on helping these podsters feel what they're feeling. So that means what's going on physiologically. These will be some of the probes you'll be using. And one of them that's a great sentence, and I'll put this in the slide. I didn't do it. I should have. When you get hooked by a hard emotion, how do you know? What does your body feel? And most people will start to know what it is. They'll know their triggers. It's my stomach gets tight. I feel a little dizzy. My palms sweat. I get dry mouth. There's something that happens physiologically with each person. And there's even some really important medical theories about where the seat of your fear lies. If it's in your solar plexus or if it's somewhere else, it has to do with the meridians and all that stuff. It really is recognizing what you feel in your body. And I think that's so important because it helps our people to recognize health in their body. Some people don't pay attention to their body at all, and so they don't think Juice Plus is working. And so when we get people that can recognize what's going on in their own bodies, we can start the process. This process is all about what's called emotional fluency and emotional granularity. Emotional fluency is the ability to recognize what you're feeling and say it. Now, I'll talk about some problems with that. Emotional granularity is about recognizing what you're feeling, but specifically what you're feeling. Not just happy, not just sad, not just pissed off. Those are the three emotions that most people recognize when there's really 30 different emotions. So emotional granularity is the ability to distinguish between being angry and being disappointed, all those kinds of things. So emotions, as I said, are feelings in your body. The only three emotions that 90% of people recognize are happy, sad, and pissed off. But there's really 30 emotions. Checking their physiology is where you start the process, and then teaching them words. I don't know if you ever saw this, but therapists, I used to have this in my, when I was working with kids in my practice. There's like this big chart with like those yellow smiley faces, and there's like 80 of them. And kids can identify what they feel by looking at those little faces without having to know the words that go with it until they get a little bit more verbal. But man, they pick out those things so specifically, the little smiley faces and the sad faces and all that stuff. Now, a good example of this is in your pod, someone may say to you, I just feel so overwhelmed by this course. And we think we know what they mean by that, and we might give them, we might just stop there because, oh heavens, we don't want someone to feel overwhelmed. Well, I have no idea what that means. And so I've been doing a lot of these three-way Voxers where a conversation coordinator has someone who's struggling. We put them in a three-way chat so that we can show them some support, give them a little extra support. And so they'll say to me, I just feel overwhelmed. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. What does that feel like to you? What does that mean to you? Typically, feeling overwhelmed just means that stuff is happening in their life, especially the kids coming home from school now, and it's like the inmates running the asylum every summer for these poor mothers. And so they feel overwhelmed, and the only thing that they can pull off their plate is this course. They can't leave their husbands, they can't throw their kids away, they can't stop doing the things they have to do for other people. So when they feel overwhelmed, they want to quit the course. Or they stop, they say, oh, it's too many calls in a week. 3 calls in a week, please. You guys do 3 calls in an hour. So when someone's feeling overwhelmed, we have to explore that. And our exploring as conversation coordinators is more along the lines of bringing something up and encouraging the pod to explore it. And by this time, most pods should have the kind of cohesion that they are starting to actually hold each other accountable. They are taking that little stretch of trust to be able to say, what do you mean by overwhelmed? Or let's see if we can help you with this. So overwhelmed, when I was in practice, when people would say, I feel depressed, I always had to find out what that meant to them. Typically, when our people feel overwhelmed, it's because they're being asked to do something they don't want to do, like a 3-way call with their success partner, or they've got other things going on in their life and this is the only thing they can take off their plate. In all but about 4 cases at this point, we have talked this through with someone and they've stayed in the program. So the overwhelmed thing is something we can work out. What happens when we are uncomfortable or we experience a disappointment or anything like that is, and you've probably done, you've seen this video of Brené's, but we create stories. And the neurobiological programming is to create stories, and we have neurotransmitters that are released when we tell ourselves a story and we think we have it handled. And then we get a reward neurotransmitter-wise, and so then we think we're okay. But typically our very first stories, which I call them suspicious first drafts. And I just want to say one thing. Whatever your preference is, we have many podsters that have a very strong reaction to profanity. And Brené's pretty open. And so we have to understand that we may use different words because our podsters, it just turns them off. And so I like to try to, help everybody feel like they can relate. So we've had a couple of things, if there's some, religion is always another thing that comes up. We're not going there tonight. But the idea is we want to help everybody feel comfortable and able to be themselves. And I don't think we need to use profanity to get our point across. I think she does it to relate to her audiences. But she calls them stormy first drafts. I call them suspicious because I'm always suspicious of that first draft. Now, what is that about? The most primitive form of understanding the world, when you really study developmental psychology and how babies formulate their psychology and they turn into toddlers and they turn into children and then adults, the most primitive way of looking at the world is called splitting. Splitting means black or white, good or bad, scary or nice. And our most primitive way of organizing our world is to, the white hat or the black hat or whatever, is to split and try to organize our world and say, okay, she's bad, but she's good, that sort of a thing. It's very, very primitive. And as people mature, the idea that the world is really gray is really how people operate. But when we're in fear, when we have that, there's really three reactions. It's fight or flight, but it's also freeze. There's fight, flight, and freeze. And something like that happens. We get very primitive when we're afraid. And we try to blame, or we try to find out, who's to blame for it, or what can we make up a story that makes us feel better, even if it's not true. The idea of trying to get out of our own feelings of fear and make up a story or make a decision just to get out of fear is usually not our best solution. And I learned this very early. One of my first internships was working with children that were abused. And when they were faced with either going back to the home where they were abused but they knew, or going to a foster family where they hopefully were safe, but they didn't know, they chose to go back to the abusive situation. Think about it. How many times do we do something like that? We choose to go back to what's familiar, not what's good for us. So that's why we have to catch these stories. If we can catch the emotion first, then we can look at what the stories that are going on, and then we can do what she calls being curious. Now, most people who are in a fear state do not feel like being curious. So this is not easy. That's why we have to give people support in the pods so that they can relax for a minute and they can look at the story they're telling themselves. And there's a whole system for this that isn't Brene Brown, it's another therapist person, but it really works. And it's like, you say to yourself, is that true? Like, let's say I say to myself, who am I looking at here? Maura Daniels. Maura is, walking around her room. She's not, but she's walking around. She's bored. I'm not doing a good job at this presentation. I can just tell that she's thinking to her head, oh my God, I wasted my time on this. Okay, then I say that story to myself. And then I say, is that true? Well, it might be true. She looks pretty bored. Is that really true? Well, no, I've known her now for 15 years. She loves this stuff. She's probably taking notes, and that's why I can't see her. So again, you work this through, because if you ask yourself enough questions, you will look at your suspicious first draft and create something new. And what Brene teaches us is what? If we write the ending to our own story, instead of this bad first draft, we own our story instead of our story owning us. If we even help half of the podsters to get a grip on this, we've changed their lives forever. Now we've learned two things. Number one, that anxiety is contagious in every pod, in every group. And number two, our brain hates ambiguity. So let's talk about for a minute how this came to play in real life. Once we started to ask the podsters to change, all of a sudden, it was very interesting to me, a lot of rumors were going around about the program. All these rumors and these sort of urban legends about what we were doing and what we were really up to, and what was really happening here. And there were some things in the field of what the requirements were. All of a sudden, people started to get a little anxious because they had to change. They caught it from each other a little bit, and they wanted to fill in the ambiguity because they didn't know what was going to happen next in the program. And this happened with some of our coordinators, some of our success partners. Now, I take the blame for some of our success partners because they didn't get a manual, they didn't get a guide, they're going to get one next year. But the idea is we saw this happening, and we had to say things in our chat, in our conversation coordinator chat, like, stay with the process, trust the process. Remember we went through that phase together? That was how this all started to play out in real life. And it was cool because what did we do? We stuck to our guns. We believed in what we were doing. And what happened was we calmed everybody down. Now, all UNMDs know how to do that because you have distributors who panic, and you're the voice of reason when it comes to the business. But now we have that ability when it comes to psychological things. And when you're done with your pod and you're dealing with your own teams, you're going to be able to use these strategies to be able to calm down your teams when things like this start to happen. So that's what your role is in the Rising Strong and Resilience part of this course. The idea that you support them in feeling what's in their body for the reckoning and the curiosity. Is that true? Is that really true? What else could be going on? The second is the rumbling, where they have to admit that what they're thinking in their head is actually wrong. It's their go-to. And it's so interesting, you know, everybody has their go-to. It's, I'm not attractive, or, oh, that's because I'm overweight, or, oh, that's because I'm not as smart as so-and-so. Whatever it is, we've got our go-tos, and they don't serve us anymore, especially in Juice Plus. Then we get to the revolution. An integral part of the revolution is having them write their suspicious first draft, and then having them write the ending. The neurobiological programming part of this, plus all the research that Brene has done and several other psychologists have done about trauma and writing things down, writing actually makes this situation outside yourself instead of part of yourself. In psychology, we call this ego syntonic, which means it's such a part of you, you can't even look at it, versus ego dystonic, it's outside yourself. And that's what we're trying to do. When they have those bad first drafts and we have them write it out, and it in a good trusting pod, it can kind of be fun because we all laugh at each other because of the similarities in the junk that we're telling each other or telling ourselves. So all of that goes on. And then you want them to write down the silly one, you know, the one that's not going to stick, and then write down the real answer. And there's been studies done on people who have had traumatic experiences and post-traumatic stress disorder, and the ability to put something in writing. Even, Catherine Lee and a bunch of you, but Catherine comes to mind, always are talking about you got to write down your goals to be able to achieve them, and the research done on that. Well, it's also about making something that's such a part of you, ego syntonic, become ego dystonic, so you can look at it and change it. It's got to get outside of yourself for you to change it. And lastly, I just want to say one thing before we get into the questions. This is a quote from Brene that I think is so applicable to the Juice Plus company, to all of us in the Juice Plus family. The level of collective courage, meaning the number of people willing to be brave, is the best predictor of an organization's ability to achieve its mission. And when I saw that, I thought to myself, wow, that's exactly what we ask our people to do every day. Get up and be brave. Care about somebody else more than you care about yourself, and talk to them about Juice Plus, or talk to them about the business, and risk rejection or humiliation. We ask our people, and you know that, you've done it yourselves. I've done it myself. Get up, and I just, some days you just don't feel like being brave. But the more we can help people be brave, the more we're going to reach our mission of inspiring healthy living around the world. And that's going to mean bigger paychecks for them, better health for their family, all that stuff. But it's also going to be the larger mission of how we're changing this world. We're changing this world health-wise, but also financially. Our compensation plan, our marketing strategy, our business model is like nothing else that's out there. We can change the world with what we're doing every single day. And I never want to forget that. And so I have that above my desk at home. So I always remember that we're asking to be brave every single day, because every day we're brave, it's one more life that's changed and one more change in this world that's a little spinning out of control. So here we have it. We're going to reach our mission by having more and more and more brave podsters, brave leaders, brave people in our Juice Plus company. And it's because all of you said yes to being coordinators to help get us started. So I'm going to end this here. And I want to just get a pen really quick so that I can take notes on anything anybody has to say. Ready, go.
Karen, stop.
Deanna, I heard Deanna first.
Yeah. I was wondering in terms, oh, there's feedback. I'm not sure where that's coming from. Can you hear that feedback?
I can't hear feedback, no.
Oh, okay. I can hear it. I don't know why. I was wondering if the next go around, if the success partners are going to have an opportunity to access the program with the people they're the success partners for, or before they actually get into it.
I couldn't hear all that. You were cutting out. Something about success partners.
Are they going to have the opportunity to do the program?
I'm offering the program to all NMDs to sign up for next year, and that's why we had this little challenge over the summer where you just pick a frontline or a second position goal, and then you'll be the first people that are offered the program next year. That was one of, actually, Deanna, you put your finger on something. That was one of the complaints in the survey about the success partners. They want to take the course, and I'm like, great, take it, so you know. Also, we're going to have a lot more materials for success partners. Who knew that so many people didn't understand about three-way calls or the value of three-way calls? Who knew? I mean, it was my fault. I thought, you know, because that's the way I was taught. Anyway, so they're going to have their own conversation guide. They're going to have a chat. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And we're doing a series of short videos of people who can do a little bit of a training. And we're going to put a collection of these 5 to 8 minute videos together for success partners. And many of you I'm going to ask to do different parts of that training. But our success partners are going to be really well provided for next time. So yes, thank you. Somebody else?
Karen, I just said, this is Carol. Oh, I am getting close to you. I'm sorry. The business partners, I think, also need to be trained to be part of this, if they're going to be part of this success partner.
Okay, let's do this. Does anyone have feedback about the actual presentation we saw? And then we'll get to what's wrong with the program.
Honestly, Karen, I need to go over this and over this and over this. This is a lot of stuff.
Okay.
It was really heavy.
Okay.
But it was really, I mean, I got it, but I have to go over it again. I'm going to record it because I need to hear it again.
Okay. Do you feel comfortable with me still recording, or should I turn that off? Do you feel comfortable? Turn it off or leave it?
Turn it off.
Turn it off. I gotta find out how you turn it off. Okay, stop recording.